The first stage in the coalescence of events that led to the Defeat of Yhwach was just after he nearly succeeded entirely. Ichigo, bound by his Quincy blood, severed the thread binding the worlds together that was the Reo. In antiquity, the first of the Soul Reaper clans bound the Reo, changing the world of the immortal soul where none could live and die into its current state of transmigration, where death allowed a cycle of change and progress. Ichigo, a symbol of progress for Soul Society, is strung along by the fate manipulated by Yhwach, the connecting line between his father, the Reo, and his son born in the dark. He himself a symbol of regression. Ultimately, this regression is where so many faults of Yhwach lie. To Soul Society, he might appear to represent change, but his desires are backwards thinking, on what the world was rather than what it is. But there is a middle ground between progress and regression, stillness. Trapped between both without his arms, the Reo is capable of neither on his own, but through Ukitake, a stillness is achieved. With a life only able to be lived through Mimihagi, the right arm of the Reo, he gave up that life to preserve the world in its current state. Considering the conflict of the first major arc, one of Soul Society's stagnancy meeting friction with Ichigo to find advancement, that the series itself might arguably be regressing is certainly odd, as stillness is sought rather than change. But it's through those hands of the Soul King that we might be able to come to a more satisfying answer, or more specifically, those of Soul Society who most relate to them. There's a fascinating number of heavy contrasts between the captains of squads 12 and 13. Kurosuchi is abhorrently amoral, casually able to commit mass murder, be it for human experimentation or to protect the stability of the worlds. Ukitake is profoundly moral, aiming to protect and nurture life at all opportunities, rejecting the execution of Rukia once it comes to his attention, and doing his utmost to try and quell the stormy water under the bridge when it comes to the struggles with Deputy Soul Reaper Ginjo. Ukitake is based in a traditional-looking abode, Kurosuchi a science lab. Ukitake a sickly patient, Kurosuchi a dark doctor. But while Ukitake follows traditional theming, Kurosuchi that of modernity and science, they start the story opposed to the Reo's hands they would come to be associated with. Kurosuchi fights Uryu ascertained of his perfection, fighting alongside a stagnant Soul Society bloated with its own stagnancy. Ukitake, however, draws his sword against Yamamoto, himself part of the next generation of leadership alongside Kyoraku relative to his old mentor, joining the fight alongside Ichigo without ever clashing swords with him or his allies like so many of those who would fight against their fellow Soul Reapers. Kurosuchi, coming to understand his own failure, comes to represent the ideas of progress in his battle against Sayalapuro, and in his final fight against Pernida, he finds a way to reconcile both sides of the duality. Pernida is the epitome of progress, where Kurosuchi's stake in the fight is represented in Nemu, his dream. As his ghost of Sayalapuro says, Kurosuchi believed her to be a perfect creation, something he must reconcile in the wake of her failure, both in defeating Pernida and preserving her own life. But as the seventh Nemu, she also represents a continuous journey of progress in Kurosuchi's own endeavors. A long dream of perfection ended with Nemu's life, allowing for more progress as he would go on to create the eighth. Nemu's own makeup of cells calls attention to this duality. Her body possesses a cell division organ that allows for her to experience rapid growth, regulated by her brain. Growth mixed with restraint representing a capacity for stillness and advancement. Pernida consumes the former, but not the latter. The being symbolic of progress, aiming to change the world in alliance with Yhwach, losing its form and self-destructing from excessive growth. Kurosuchi may have been unnecessarily cruel to Nemu, but she was his dream and he wanted her to live even though it might have better suited his science to simply continue to progress, throwing everything away. Leaning towards advancement, he keeps hold of just enough stillness to maintain sustainability. Ukitake's actions in Soul Society assist in its progress as he protects Rukia and Ichigo in stopping the Firebird before clashing with Yamamoto. In the fight against Aizen, he spends more time guiding Lilinet, his opponent in this war, when it might have been better served to defeat her, trying to guide the child of the next generation even if she might be a natural enemy of his. The Fullbring arc introduces his conflict against Ginjo, where he tries to handle his resurgence with less pain than he was able to do previously, putting his trust in Ichigo to stay on the right path where Ginjo failed before, allowing for new possibilities and changes. The monitoring of Deputy Soul Reapers remained in a state of stillness, but Ichigo and Ukitake continue to trust one another, allowing for change in spirit even if the means remain the same. And in his finality, Ukitake aims to preserve the state of the world, giving his life for stagnancy, but for the purpose of allowing continued advancement. Yhwach's world would exist between stillness and motion like the Reo Ukitake supplanted, and the world outside the palace would continue to grow and advance while Ukitake's life whittled away so those he trusted the future to could defeat Yhwach once and for all. Yhwach's success was in reach, but the man desiring regression had to settle for stillness, absorbing all that the Reo was, Mimihagi included. The stillness that was once anathema to Soul Society because it prevented advancement now protected the world from Yhwach's regression, allowing for it to advance even further beyond. Affixed to his throne, where Ukitake was able to keep him and the world in place, Hashwalth would blind him, using his temporary acquisition of the Almighty to grant Yhwach a vision of the future in which Ichigo defeated him. He reveled in this nightmare, perhaps believing it would be his last one in this world of life and death before he changed its nature utterly. That very dismissal of Ichigo's capability, of the heart within Hashwalth he could not see, he would set the stage for his later defeat. Hashwalth held the name of his comrade in his palm, walking the path of balance as he aimed to fulfill their goal of defeating Yhwach even as he cut away his direct bond with that comrade. Granting misfortune to the fortunate, he maintains his balance. A vision of misfortune granted to the most fortunate. Bazb was unfortunately separated from the comrade who'd given him so much power, and Hashwalth himself, granted a great position by Yhwach, would see his faults in his antithesis, Uryu, who was able to join the Quincy's without cutting away the bonds with those he wanted to protect. Hashwalth's own balance was maintained as he killed Bazb, his misfortune born to achieve their collective fortune. Uryu chose to walk one path, and Hashwalth another. To help Uryu live on without regret, he would take on his wounds so he could help his friends and accomplish what Hashwalth wasn't able to. He found his true balance not by compromising, finding a middle way with the one who takes all to rule all, but by taking a stance against that uncompromising force aiming to be above. Living without regret, by leaving his heart behind him through Uryu, he was able to surpass so many of his peers, so gripped by their fear of death. Where Yhwach saw all possible futures, desperately avoiding his own demise, Hashwalth saw the very same vision and still chose the one that would bring Yhwach down, even if he too would meet his end. But while Yhwach's nightmare set the stage for his fall, the following awakening and clash with Ichigo were marked not by his failure, but his success, as he broke Ichigo's Bankai and his spirit. Though this would not be the blade that cut down Yhwach, not quite, the blade needed to be repaired so that Ichigo could swing the sword that would shatter fate. Its recovery was twofold. First allowed by a man who for so long wanted to be a hero. Saved by Ginjo, Tsukishima longed to save him, that man so hurt by his betrayal. Though he acted out his plan in a manner befitting a villain in his skulking deceit, his desire to be a hero could not easily be removed. Gaining the trust of Ichigo's friends, he did so by supplanting Ichigo's deeds, fighting his enemies, protecting his comrades. Tsukishima became the hero of their past at Ichigo's expense. Not family, not merely a trusted friend, not just as a brother in arms, but the strongest and most reliable of them. Yet forcing the false bond did not supplant Ichigo in everyone else's hearts, and his role as an illusory hero could never save anyone. It wasn't Tsukishima who saved Ginjo, as Ririka says, it was Ichigo. But beyond the pale of death, Tsukishima finds fulfillment not by forcing himself into the spotlight, but by taking a supporting role to save the one who saved Ginjo, using his full-bring abilities, those drawn from the nails of the Reo, driven by his own pride as a human. His manipulation of the past resists Yhwach's manipulation of the future. A past he couldn't truly change no matter how much he swung his sword didn't define him as much as the future he could help carve a path through in the blade of another. The shield, however, was a bit less fortunate in the power matchup with Yhwach. While Aizen once praised her abilities that could reject divine law by undoing damage incurred in the past, she can't undo a future that hasn't happened. A future she wants to one day embrace alongside Ichigo. But overcoming the past allowed them to reach this present. Not trusted by others, not trusting her own strength, she was a princess to be protected, and that desire to protect her turned Ichigo into the monster that threatened her. Being weak and needing protection had preserved the esteem of those around her, but that had caused more pain. Orihime found her role not by forcing herself to be a fighter when she has no synergy with violence, but by embracing her power as a protector. Ichigo finally mutually trusting her, they battle Yhwach, Orihime not only protecting him with her shield, but checking his desire for battle and desire for vengeance. A potentially reckless charge becoming refined as the sword could act freely with the shield at his side. This act of Orihime enabling Ichigo to fight while maintaining himself is symbolized as she repairs the Bankai, the blade that is him. Accompanied by two into the final clash, Renji charges into battle even though he is desperately outclassed by Yhwach. Having lived paralyzed by fear, pushed into motion by Ichigo, he tells him that he'll never stop moving forward. dragging him along if he needs to. Leading the charge, the boy behind him could not hesitate, but he wasn't the only one. Aizen opposes any who seek to control him, facing down Yhwach alongside his former foes of Soul Society, but his alliance with Ichigo is particularly meaningful. Ichigo remarked at the end of their battle that Aizen, alone in the world, sought to be understood by someone even through the heavy veils he obfuscates himself under. Yhwach formed bonds with no one, observing all futures and seeing only those outer layers, rendering him vulnerable to Aizen's illusion. To see all possible futures includes one where he might cut off Ichigo's arm and impale him, Aizen showing him that same possibility as an illusory present. Though impaled in the chest where his heart lies, in this moment it's Yhwach in the palm of Aizen's hand. Unlike Yhwach, Ichigo fights to understand the heart of those he battles, long ago escaping Aizen's palm and allowing for the heart to form between them. This culminates with Ichigo sensing Kyoka Suigetsu being active and fighting accordingly, reaching a mutual understanding with Aizen without even needing to converse beforehand. Alongside Ichigo, the one he finds the most insufferable, he basks in the moment as he's finally understood by another, one he too understands, having taken the form of a hero for a brief moment, finally able to trust and allow himself to be trusted. Entering the final clash, the efforts leading to this point finally come to fruition, starting with Uryu, wielding the silver arrow. Having seen his father dissecting his mother's corpse, he would walk a path to distance himself from that man he wanted to be nothing like, primarily concerned with profit and turning his wife into an object to be toyed with. Uryu would fully embrace the Quincy heritage his father had misgivings about, standing against Soul Reapers, standing against the man who seemed to represent the worst aspects of what a doctor could be, but this was all childish misconception and lack of understanding. Ryuken's claim that there was no profit in the Quincy's stems from Yhwach, the one who took the life of his wife Kanai and so many others with Quincy blood. He who would take away anything while proclaiming it's for the greatest happiness stands against Ryuken's own ideals. That happiness is needed to set sights on the future, and Yhwach, aiming to remove the future, removing the happiness of the many from the few, is not the path of benefit for the Quincy's. The operation on his wife Kanai's corpse was to gather the silver needed for the arrow directly from her heart. Yhwach, blind to the hearts of others, incapable and unwilling of forming a heart himself, was in part felled by this literal representation. Uryu taking the arrow and becoming a doctor symbolizes the accord reached with his father as he finally understands him, and the effect of the arrow on Yhwach, the stillness imbued into the arrow, latches the man who can alter the future into the present, regressing him who wants to regress the entire world to a pure stillness. The layers of karmic irony laced into the bow, born from a Quincy he dismissed as negligible and expendable, crafted by the family in his bloodline who so staunchly opposed him in the war against their own blood, wielded by the one who overcame a strained relationship with his father as he strikes down the father above all, renders his powers null for the final blow by Ichigo. The sword is blocked, and it breaks, but the blade is still him, both of them. If I can't protect them from the wheel of time, then give me the sword to shatter fate. A part of Ichigo wanted the world Yhwach seeks to realize, wanted a world where his loved ones wouldn't have to be turned to grist by the wheel of fate. His bargain in the face of that impossibility was to have the power to fight against fate, a power he sought through his journey across the story. Old Man Zangetsu, the form Yhwach takes in Ichigo's soul, the chain in his blood connecting him back to that immense figure, quietly promises that he won't let rain fall on Ichigo's world, that the world where the wheel of time halts is very much possible. But through watching Ichigo challenge his fate, grow stronger, and fight on a path of courage only possible because he faces death time and time again, he comes to find joy in stepping away, joy in stepping back and letting Ichigo take the reins on the future while his core self takes the place of his father, the Ryo, seeking to regress to the past, sacrificing as many of his descendants as possible and stealing their futures to do so. This final clash between Ichigo and Yhwach is one between two conflicting sides of Yhwach. One who only looks to the past despite his control of the future, and one who's placed his trust in the future, and that future reciprocated, finding happiness manifested as he took the path the Ryo might have truly wanted. The Ryo, possessing the same capability as Yhwach and the Almighty, was able to see the future when the founders of the 5 clans ripped him asunder. They believed he might have chosen this future. While there is some in-universe disagreement to this, what is interesting is that Yhwach exists at all. Ryo born, through this sun he had a pathway to the future even though he himself was trapped between stillness and progress. In the future he saw and once had potential to change, he in part accepted a future of life and death through leaving behind his own blood to further walk the path of life and death that the Ryo, neither living or dead, would be able to truly walk. Yhwach, desperately trying to return the world to the state his father ruled over, was surpassed as Ichigo fathered Kazui and became closer to the will of the Reo than Yhwach could ever hope to. The ultimate success on his path of courage, braving death, was to have a descendant. To see a world full of hardship and strife and still make the choice to bring another soul into it. One to help guide on their own journey of change and growth to find happiness only they can experience. The happiness Yhwach threatened to grant his enemies before he snuffed them out. But instead, that culmination of everything that was Ichigo's life up to that point, his friends, his wife, his peace, instead snuffed out Yhwach. Yhwach, so gripped by fear of death, had his efforts gradually whittled away by those who accepted death and conquered their fear. Ukitake's sacrifice, Haschwalth's path without regret, Tsukishima overcoming his prior failure, Orihime finding her unique place in a world of violence, Renji finding the strength to move forward, Aizen losing a need to fear his loneliness, Uryu's understanding bridging the gap between him and his father, Zangetsu finding the courage to step away even if it means the end of his core self, and Ichigo taking the steps to the future bravely. Hey, hope you enjoyed the video. If you're interested in what I've got cooking, I'd recommend becoming a patron. At the $5 tier, you can access my Discord and see a vlog where I go through all my video ideas. And you can even suggest which ones I might do sooner rather than later. Thanks for watching and have a good one.